It's interesting. When I was a student teacher, there was a student with Down syndrome who I had to get my regular credential before I was able to become a special ed teacher. Back then, that was a requirement. So I was doing a student teaching assignment in a general education classroom, but a student with Down syndrome was mainstreaming or fully included in the classroom with an aide. And the student couldn't do the same work as everybody else. And, but, the aide helped him at least be part of the classroom and be part of everything. And this was so interesting because I would hear the teachers and the staff saying, she should let him go to a special classroom. He should be in a special classroom. He's doing a completely separate, work. He's not doing the same thing as everybody else. So why is he even in there? Interestingly enough, she kept him and she fought to keep him in general education up until high school. And, people kept arguing with her and she didn't want it. Well, this was amazing to me. This was a very eye-opening life lesson for me. And it goes to what you're saying. And that is, I saw her years later and she said, I'm so glad that I fought to keep him in general education, because being exposed to having those high expectations and being exposed to general ed students who, they're not playing with Thomas the Tank Engine anymore in ninth grade. They're doing different things and listening to music and sitting around chatting around drinking coffee or whatever. And she said, that was the moment that I realized I had done the right thing, because he was fully able to function and engage with his typical peers without issue, without problem.
What if everything that's wrong with Eddie is all my fault? Mom says it's not true, but how does she know? I mean, I'm the twin who was born first. Maybe everything would have been different if I let Eddie out ahead of me.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to an episode of The Box Cutter, where this month is Mental Health Awareness Month, which happens between May 1st and May 31st to give awareness of mental health and mental disabilities. And with me today is returning guest, elementary school principal and former special education administrator, teacher, educator, Laura Clark. How are you doing?
Good. Thank you, Daniel.
So, the movie we're going to be covering today is called Tru Confession, a Disney Channel original movie that came out in 2002, starring Shia LaBeouf. Two-sentence summary about the movie is twins Tru and Eddie. They're twins, except one has a learning disability while the other is normal, and we see through the perspective of Tru not only what it's like to be a twin, but also the positives and the negatives of living with someone with handicaps or learning disabilities, as well as how it affects other people within her family. Last time we talked, you mentioned that you started out in special education. What was your take on watching this movie?
Well, I had a lot of thoughts about this movie, and I think just generally speaking, I think it was a good introduction to what it's like to have, a sibling who has a disability and a son and a family member who has a disability. However, actually, I think that it was a good introduction because it didn't go as far as I think that families who actually do deal with this have to deal with. Like, I'll give you an example. The dad is a neurosurgeon. They obviously have plenty of money. And so, for this family, possibly they didn't have, financial strains or other strains that make it more difficult or challenging to deal with. So this was a good introduction. I think it was a great way, like you said, when you were young, you saw this movie, and for someone in your position, it would have been a really great way to learn about this topic. But I think that, it could even go further into, families who struggle in other ways and how sometimes disabilities can affect the family on a deeper level. So I thought it was a wonderful way to introduce children to the topic.
Mm-hmm. And in the movie, it's never really explicitly said what his Shia LaBeouf's character Eddie, what his disability is. And I think it's very considerate of the director, writer, whoever wrote this, because this is based on a book. So I guess the writer of the book and the movie to leave out that detail, because just so that way there's a lot of relatability versus oh, this is a movie about someone with autism or someone with and so I guess it gives more leeway in terms of ambiguity of just general disability, but also giving awareness to the topic of I guess shining a spotlight on not only disability but also those who live a life with someone of disability.
Right.
Throughout the film, there's like a kind of a plot. I guess the movie is more of a slice of life about a girl and her brother and her family, and the dynamics that they go through with all this. And I'm not an expert in terms of special education or mental disabilities, but it really does resonate with me, this type of movie, because, well, I guess because there isn't really that much in terms of exposure of the topic when it comes to like TV or videos on YouTube. It's like people shy away from that type of topic. Why do you think that is? Why do people try and steer clear of bringing up the topic or educating people on it?
I think it's uncomfortable. I think that people who don't have experience with this in their life, they don't know how to deal with it. They don't seek it out. It's not something that they look for and want to learn about. I think that if a child saw this, though, I think it would really open them up to it more. And so I think that we need more things in media like this for sure. And I love that it's from the perspective of the sibling, because in my time in special education, especially their disabilities are they range anywhere from profound to mild. And so, and you have, children and adults everywhere in between on that spectrum, from profoundly disabled to, mildly disabled. And
could you elaborate more on what it means by profound and mild?
Mm-hmm. So a mild disability would be like a learning disability where, like dyslexia, for example,
Mm-hmm.
like the person they have average to above intellectual ability,
Mm-hmm.
but they have a processing disorder that makes, for example, reading difficult. So in
Mm-hmm.
their life, they'd be going about their life and you would have no idea that they have a disability until you put a book in front of them.
Mm-hmm.
And so that visual processing that makes letters difficult for them,
Mm-hmm.
that's when their disability kicks in. Other than that, or a speech disability in speech where, they might not be able to say their R's correctly, but for all intents and purposes, the rest of their life, they have access to everything that they need. So,
Mm-hmm.
kind of moving down from there. And as you might know, autism is on a spectrum from mild to profound as well. So some disabilities within themselves have that spectrum. And then as you move down, so someone who's more moderate to severely disabled might be somebody who has the eligibility of Down syndrome, or an intellectual disability. And in this movie, Eddie, he was more moderately disabled. He could. They had that scene where he was didn't want to brush his teeth. I don't know if you remember. She was trying to film him brushing his teeth. So I couldn't tell if he was just being obstinate or if he really can or can't brush his teeth. But a characteristic of someone with like a moderate intellectual disability is someone who does have difficulty with self-care. So they might not either know how to brush their teeth or they don't remember, or, that's sort of in the moderate range. And then from the more severe to profound, disabilities, those are typically people with multiple disabilities. So you might have severe intellectual disabilities where maybe you can't even speak, maybe you can't do any self-care, and you might also have physical disabilities where even if you couldn't get up to go do it. More people who are profoundly disabled more are typically immobile and unable to do any care for themselves or communicate or really interact with the outside world much at all. So you've got someone like Tom Cruise on the top end who has a learning disability and has a difficulty with dyslexia, to someone at the other end who wouldn't recognize their own name, maybe can't even hear it, so that's where profound. So just there's a wide range of disabilities. And so I think that's why this movie is an interesting kind of introduction, because when you look at Eddie, he really, he might have had behaviors that were difficult. And he probably would never live in an apartment by himself, but, he could play soccer with the other kids, and he could, so that's why he's in the moderate range. He'll never live on his own, but probably, but he could still participate in activities and recreation, leisure, and, have a conversation with the family at dinner. So a lot of movies focus on the person with the disability. But in this case, in this movie, they focused on the sibling, and there's not enough of that, because in my experience in special education, especially when the child is or adult is more moderate to severely to profoundly disabled, the siblings and the weight and the responsibility is very, very, they kind of disappear. Their parents are focused on the person with the disability, and they kind of get left out. They end up in the caretaker role. I thought it was interesting in the movie, and I know I keep talking, but I thought it was interesting when she said, I will go have a family and get married and go to college, and he is still going to be like this. And maybe because the movie is made for kids that they didn't mention, but on a deeper level, and that's what I was saying, there are deeper, more profound kind of experiences that siblings have to have. She never mentioned, and when you're gone, I'm going to have to care for him. And so the burden, this movie kind of shown more the personal impact of having a sibling with a disability, but not really the lifelong impact and the responsibility. There are some heavy things when you have a sibling with a disability that will require a lifetime of care.
Yeah. Well, you bring that up. How the way the movie starts, the typical, kids movie of like, oh, I wish my life was like a sitcom because then everything would be perfect. Everything seemed fine, but as when we get into her personal life, a few minutes into the movie, that's when it starts to become kind of clear of like, oh, I see what she means by she wishes her life was perfect, because of her twin brother Eddie, having these difficulties. Whereas, I guess what I'm trying to say is kids always have that desire of, oh, I wish my life was perfect. But in some cases, I guess other kids just want to know what it's like to just have that gone for a quick minute and just like experience the normal, quote unquote, normal life of a kid without having to be the caretaker, or having to grow up and be mature, responsible, and take care of their sibling.
Exactly. And I think even part of that too was the relationship with the parents, because, mom had been so focused on the son, and, we had more patience for him and more flexibility and things like that, which if he didn't have that disability, would that have changed her relationship with her mom? Probably. And dad, it seemed like a lot of his anger and bitterness and wanting, not necessarily being part of the family had to do with, they alluded to him kind of hoping that his son would kind of get over it or get past it, or, he wasn't really in reality. And so that kind of made him kind of an angry, impatient man. And so the way that the parents interacted with her was definitely influenced by their experience with their son, and how that had an impact on their marriage and on their own feelings about themselves and their inadequacies. And, it's just, if you really look deeper into it, they're, the whole family dynamic is influenced by this. And unless a family really focuses on that and addresses that head on, it could have negative impacts on their relationships forever. So, I think that's another important piece in how this affects the family dynamics. And it can be a beautiful thing. It can have a really positive one. It can bring the family together, or it can tear a family apart.
Yeah. Well, I think it's interesting too, because I guess they represent two ends of a different spectrum of parenting, where one is very patient, whereas the other is very expectant.
Right.
And I guess it just shows the two different styles and how it can work, and at the same time how it can clash, because the dad has these, doesn't want people to cast his son aside, cast Eddie aside of, oh, he's just like every other child with learning disabilities. That's why I guess he had the whole rigid expectations of him being able to do more than people are expecting of him, versus his mom just on the other end, where she's patient and she's loving and she plays along with him, and that is encouraging and inviting, but also it's not challenging him to go past the boundaries people put on him.
Yeah, exactly. I noticed that you just mentioned in the movie, when Dad said, we need to kind of push him more. And I wonder if people who saw the movie thought that was a bad thing, because Dad was such a kind of a grouch, But I think that there's a balance between letting them be who they want to be, which is wonderful, being patient and kind and loving, and also keeping to push them to say, no, you don't roller skate in the house. That's not appropriate. Because if you go to somebody else's house and they try to do that, then no one's going to want to socialize with you. It's teaching them how to engage in the world that's appropriate, and that will serve them very well, because they can then possibly get a job and work part-time, or they can't do that if they're going to roller skate around, or that kind of thing. So I think that you're spot on, that the parents were very different from each other, and both needed to grow in their parenting and in how they handled things. And so that was very interesting to me.
Yeah. And to give a little more spotlight on the dad, what you mentioned of him being a grouch, that's kind of what I remembered him as. And rewatching this movie, I picked up on when Tru wasn't there with her camera, you could see the intimate moments, when Eddie was, crying on the floor while he was sleeping, Dad tucked him in and stayed with them until he stopped crying. And, he would play, and he played catch with him, even though he would get impatient with how Eddie was throwing the ball. He still makes efforts. It's just because he is a neurosurgeon, that he has a stressing job, and it's demanding, that it seems like it's sort of like he's trying to find an escape from his family. But I think what the thing is that, from my understanding, is he is, I guess, in a way punishing himself for he's like, why can't I do anything to make my son, I guess, better? Because, well, would he have that type of career if his son wasn't, had a disability? Is my question of is he punishing himself, and just getting frustrated with his family because, well, he feels partly responsible for the way his son was born?
And that's excellent. It's an excellent point, and it's very common for people. And you notice in the story too, Tru did say, "Did I do something in the womb? Should I have let him
Mhm.
come out first?" I mean, there is a lot of guilt. I'm sure the mom. I don't remember her expressing anything like that, but it seemed like it was an interesting choice of having the dad. Now, is this a true story or is this fiction? Do you know?
No, it's just it's fiction. It's a written story.
Okay, so then it was a choice, and I think you're right. I think that that it was a very calculated choice to make dad a neurosurgeon. Now, whether he was one before the son was born or not, either way, I think that it just shined a light on the guilt that he might be feeling, or the irony of his line of business, and it can happen to anyone. You know,
Mhm.
you can be a brilliant person in the field of working on brains, and this can happen. You know, I mean,
Mhm.
I think that was a really purposeful choice.
And so with focus on mom now, mom kind of I feel I have such a soft heart for the mom because she goes through a lot of the ringer in this movie of it she's not purposely leaving out True because of Eddie. It's just that she works too, and she has to maintain a house, and she has a son that has learning, is moderate in terms of special how is it special needs or disability? Is it mental
Yeah,
disability?
either one is fine. Yeah, I
Okay.
would say he's intellectually the right word would be intellectually disabled.
Okay, so intellectually disabled, and it's trying to make time for her, for True, but True is just, at that point in adolescence where she wants her privacy, but at the same time she wants to be just told that she's right all the time, and just told the right thing, but it's like, yeah, she just wants to indulge in normalcy, but it's just frustrated because that's not the reality she has, and she
I,
takes
I,
it out on her mom.
I think they did a good job of showing. Yeah, I wrote in my notes. I wrote, and I didn't mean this in a negative really way, but
Hmm.
I wrote very self focused. She, at least at the beginning of the movie, obviously she had
Hmm.
a journey throughout the movie, but I think they did a good job of showing how teenagers really are so focused on. They're not necessarily taking the perspective of their mom, or
Hmm.
they're so focused on their own feelings and thoughts and ideas, and I think you're right. Mom was in a really bad position. I don't know that mom could have won.
Yeah, I mean, well, when you marry a man that's highly intellectual and very demanding as well, her husband, and a daughter who's very much like her father, um, well, it's like, what do you do besides just let out a sigh of sadness, and take it all in.
Yeah.
Well, moving on past the character, let's talk about the movie a bit more. So the whole thing of True and her passion for filming and all that stuff. I think it's interesting, kind of foreshadowing of kind of how daily, the those vlogs are those vlogs that are on YouTube of people's lives, and just her talking about how she's frustrated, or like and just like what she plans to do in her life in the future. And there's this contest where the winner gets their submission shown on TV. And at first she wants to educate people on what exactly the brain does and how Eddie's brain is wired. And she kind of fails. Well, it's not fail, but her first draft is a slog. And I guess well, we can talk about the part, but basically she revises it and starts to show her life through her eyes of living with a brother with what is it? I'm sorry, an
Oh,
intellectual disability.
yes.
Thank you. Um, so um I think it's very mature. It's very mature for her to do something that a lot of adults these days have a hard time doing, which is being transparent and vulnerable about their lives.
Right. I think this movie is about a journey. I know you said there isn't much plot, which I agree. I mean, there really,
Mhm.
really isn't a lot of plot, but there is a lot of journey and the characters change. And so I think it was kind of a metaphor for her own journey that the first video was very dry and bland, not because she's dry and bland, but because her perspective,
Mhm.
her maturity, her ability to see from other perspectives, like I mentioned earlier. It was very kind of one-sided, and like I didn't, you know what? Until you just said that she's more like her father, it didn't occur to me until you said that, and so it was the first video was very much like her father, like very just intellectual and kind of dry and focused and that kind of thing. And so I think that the discovery of more who she is and exploring the dynamics in her family and things like that coming to fruition in the second video, I think is the metaphor for her journey. And I like what you said about, I think where you were going with kind of, it was sort of a fortune telling moment for TikTok and YouTube and things like that,
Yeah.
because this is 2002 and I was watching it and, of course it's old equipment and old video cameras and things like that.
Mhm.
But I was like, wow, this really looks like a modern day YouTube, a modern day TikTok. And so it was like, wow, 20 years ago, they kind of had their finger on the pulse of what was coming up
Yeah.
in the future. But just as I'm sure if you look at videos on a 14-year-old's YouTube channel, hopefully you would also see the journey that they've gone through and changed as a person over time. But this was a lot quicker and a lot more specific. But I did like the way that they used the videos to show how she's growing and changing and willing to look at things differently.
Yeah. And what I noticed too, going back to the video, she had a box, and in that box it said like top secret, and it was videos of her and her brother, like as if her life is like a dirty secret she doesn't want
Oh,
people to know about.
yeah.
And by her showing people the what she thought was a dirty secret really empowered her to take control of her life and not let her brother be this dirty secret that she's ashamed of, but actually happy that he's in her life.
That's an excellent point. I never thought of that. That's excellent.
um and so there's that. Another subplot is how True just doesn't feel like she can talk to her mom anymore, because her mom just seems to spend so much time with her brother that she just does. There's a disconnect, it seems. And so she goes on these like this medical message board about her brother, and her mom finds it and goes under this alias of Dee Dee, and uses that as a means to guide her in terms of how to see the world and whatnot. My take on that is, well, I can see both sides of it. I can see why, because, well, no one really runs to their mom when they're older now, because it's like they just feel like they're too old to be running to mom or dad or whoever, that they need to work these things out on their own. But in the perspective of her mom, it's like her mom's been through experiences and has all this wisdom that um she feels kind of sad that her daughter is not going to her to get this these this advice.
Yeah, but I agree. There's another side because mom wasn't exactly warm and supportive to her either. I mean,
Hmm.
when she said she was going to, do this video contest, and mom said, oh, basically, don't get your hopes up, honey. I mean,
Hmm.
wow. I mean, so mom, she wasn't the most positive with her daughter either. I mean, she wasn't mean,
Hmm.
but she just wasn't always open to her daughter either. I mean, from mom's perspective, her daughter was closed up to her, but I think she had also closed up to her daughter as well.
Hmm. Especially, I think towards I guess the end of the movie where they try and reconcile, her mom doesn't like stop from watering the plants. Her mom just looks at her and then just keeps on watering the plants because, well, seems like they're just on a period of distance.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Um, and another point would be school. School was kind of a factor in this movie of like how how True had a fixation for this boy who was older, and she wanted to be seen as like normal and perfect in front of this boy that she liked. Um, and that if only he liked her and they went out, that her life would be perfect. Um, but in a very disheartening way, she learned that this boy that she liked isn't
That was horrible. Oh my God.
but it's the reality
Right.
of the world, and it's like we have to be uncomfortable to know how to face these types of situations. And there is a word in this movie that is thrown around a lot, that's outdated, but it was part of the regular vocabulary of the time. You know, it the I don't know. It's like,
Yes.
you know what I'm saying.
Yes.
It's a condensed form of retardation.
Yes. Yes. And that's why we've changed the terminology. Even in the law books now,
Hmm.
they've changed the terminology because these days it's very offensive. I know this was 20 years ago, but you would never, that wouldn't be used in a movie. Another word that's not really used that I noticed they use the word handicapped, and that's also, I mean, it's not on the same level as the other word,
Hmm.
but it's still, handicapped is not necessarily a word that is seen as a positive when referring to people with disabilities. So another interesting thing is that when referring to people with disabilities, you always use people first language. So I didn't hear anything opposite of this in the movie, but I was watching for it. So when you say people first, you mean instead of saying um, the Down syndrome kid, you
Hmm.
don't say the Down syndrome kid. You say, the child with Down syndrome. You put the child first.
Hmm.
You put the person first. So you wouldn't say deaf person. You would say person with a hearing impairment. So people first language is putting the person first. And so when I heard the word handicap, I thought, I'm going to keep my eye out for any other things. I noticed the word you
Hmm.
said, but other than that, I didn't notice anything else um,
I thought it was
inappropriate.
interesting that like what you said, people first, they didn't say that. They were just saying Eddie.
Yes.
And
Yes.
I think they were intentionally doing that because, well, it's like he's more than just what he has, but also to keep it ambiguous. It's like he's not just the kid with intellectual disabilities. He's Eddie.
Exactly, which was great. He's a person. He's
Yeah.
not defined by his disability. That you're right. That's great.
And well, you and I both work with children with disabilities, and so like it's I didn't see, well, I guess what I'm saying it is, well, we never really run into that issue of saying, oh, that person with this or that person with that. We always seem to just forget about that and just remember that this person, that person, that person, this person.
Right.
And but when it comes to issues, we keep in mind, oh, it's because they have this, let's approach it this way, or it's because they do this, let's avoid doing this.
Exactly. Exactly. It's about supporting the person and who they are and not focusing on the disability. Yep. You're right.
And truth friends were true friends. Pun, I don't know, intended, I guess, but yeah, they regardless of her brother, they were still her friends, and they included him, and they, when True had an idea and she ran home, she trusted them to look after,
Oh,
you
yeah.
know, her brother. And yeah, it's like, it's not far-fetched, but it's very nice to see that people can have friends who are genuinely, you know caring for people regardless of what they have with them.
Exactly.
And a few other key points, one of them being the kite, the scene with the kite. Throughout the movie, you keep hearing that word, referring to Eddie, and it's when they go to the beach. He's frustrated because he can't fly his kite the right way, that he called it stupid, and he gets mad at it. And from hearing the word so often, he calls his kite that. And it's very disheartening. It's very raw. The fact that, you think that people perceive that, oh, they don't know what it means. Regardless of if people don't know what it means, they still can, pick up on what's being said and add it to their vocabulary. So the fact that it was just thrown around so much, it's like they tainted his innocence.
Exactly. And in that moment, I felt like, I don't know if I was reading too much into it though, that when he was punching it and trying to smash it, that he was kind of angry at himself, that he was kind of putting, kind of personifying himself in the, shape of the kite and feeling like this doesn't work. I don't work. This is, he used the word, the R word, and then he feels that about himself. And so I think that what people don't understand, who maybe don't have as much experience or knowledge of people with disabilities, is um, many people who have disabilities, especially the more moderate to severe, they know they're different. They realize it. They do. I mean, it's so true for so many that they recognize and they wish they could be different. They wish, and they get frustrated when they find out, I'm never going to drive a car. I'm never going to, you know,
Mm-hmm.
be able to do the same things. Well, how come she? And I can imagine as a twin, it would be even more frustrating because, it's not like sometime in the future. It's now. I see my sister driving a car and I can't. I see my
Mm-hmm.
sister going to college and I can't. I see my sister, doing these things that I can't. And it does have an effect, and it does affect their self-esteem. And they, so that's why I felt like with the kite, he was not just angry at the kite, but at himself and feeling bad about himself. It was
Mm-hmm.
heartbreaking.
And when you mentioned twins, it reminded me of when when they were reading a book together, and Eddie asked True, he like, "Are you mad at me? And because you never play with me anymore?" And it's like, it's hard because you can't stop time, and it's like, just like how she said at the end of the movie, I'll probably go off to college and end up getting married, and Eddie will still just be Eddie. And it's like, she doesn't want to leave him behind, but she can't stay there. She has to live her life too.
Right. And that's hard. That's hard for everyone in the family.
Hmm. And one of the other big scenes is when they go to the library scene where they go to, I guess, the local university library because it's pretty big,
Yeah.
not a local library. And so Eddie is getting some more books and he drops one into the elevator, and he ends up getting lost in the library and screaming for his sister. Um, what I got from it was parallels of kind of being an adult without anyone to care for you. Basically, he was like, nobody paid mind to him in the elevator. No one cared that he was on the floor. Everyone was just looking at the door, and everyone just left the elevator, and he was, left somewhere where he wasn't familiar with, and he just kept running around, didn't know where to go. And for a moment we kind of feel that panic that he was feeling of not knowing where to go and where to find help.
Exactly. The definition of an intellectual disability is not just below average intelligence, but it's
Mhm.
also, um, kind of a um, lower development in the self care, the life skills. And part of life skills is just navigating the community, being able to um, take care of yourself, but also figure things out to kind of move around the world. And so that really highlighted the differences between the two, his sister and himself, and how much care he's going to need in the future, and how he won't be on his own. I think that was part of what that scene was about. Was he won't be able to be on his own someday, and
Mhm.
and he'll always need to have supervision and
Mhm.
support, and that's, I think, when they were sitting on the floor in the library with the books, and you know I think part of it was calming him and making him feel better, but I think part of it was just the realization of, wow, this is going to be a lifelong long thing for him, and a little bit of grief over that.
When you mentioned they were, she was comforting him, and just the whole revelation that Eddie's character had of, when he tells Tru that he's different, and she tries to just be like, no, everyone's different, but he just makes the profound statement of that he's tired of being different, because he's real different, he wants to be done with it.
Right.
And you could see the heartbreak in her eyes of, and she just tries to rationalize with him, that he wouldn't get all the help in school that he'd get, and he wouldn't be allowed to do things that his parents let him do, and he would not be the same brother that she loves with all her heart.
Right.
And not a dry eye where I was when I saw that.
Yeah.
It's very, I think people forget that. I think people forget that people with these disabilities, they have the thought of what I want, what other people have. I'm tired of this. But
Right.
and it's like we either talk on their behalf or think on their behalf, and or make decisions for them on their behalf, and but we sometimes take them out of the equation and just think of what in their best interest versus, well, what do they want?
Right. Exactly. Exactly.
And I guess the last thing we'll touch on is just the whole introspection of family, in terms of, when True's video was shown on TV because she won, her dad wasn't in it. And it showed that, and when her dad asked about it, she showed him, she didn't tell him, she showed him but she was hesitant at first. But it's like, I like the fact that she didn't really say what the problem was. She just let the truth speak for itself of what the camera was showing.
Right. Exactly.
And the same thing with the clip of her saying, when I, have my own TV show, I want to cast somebody else as my mom. And just
Right.
seeing that, the one glance back that her mom has with her. And yeah, it's a thing of we we sh- we are allowed to have our moments of frustration, but we can't just resort to them because they're, we find them as a comfort, or they're the easier route versus practicing our patience or taking a different approach to things.
Right. Although I think that it was so valuable that it was caught on video, and that like dad's outbursts were caught on video, because I think that the videos were key to the quick transformation of the characters and the journey that they were on. I mean, it really, put it on light speed to just take a hard look at themselves. So even though it was inappropriate, insensitive for her to say that, I think that the fact that she caught it on video and was willing to look at it and think about her behavior and be willing to change, I think that's the important thing. I think that's one of the important messages of the movie is, you need to take a look at yourself. You need to realize, how you approach others and how you treat others, and to take the perspective of others. And that was, I think, the point of her award-winning video too, is look at how other people live their lives, and don't treat people disrespectfully without understanding what they're going through. And I think that was really the theme of the film, was to really be able to understand how other people are dealing with issues just like you are.
Yeah. And I appreciate that everyone at her school basically was like practically everyone was supportive of just, I guess, opening up her world to them and showing that it's not just struggles. There's also just, beauty in the way he lives his life. He reminds us to laugh and to forgive and love. And when she mentions how he will never get mad at us because we're his world, all he knows is to love us.
Right. Exactly. I wrote a quote down I just loved it. She said, "He teaches me what's important in life." And I thought that was a really beautiful message.
Yeah. And so overall, Tru Confession is available to stream on Disney Plus. I feel that the movie definitely holds up in regards to being an introduction to, I guess, the life of people who live with the siblings or relatives with a intellectual disability, and the turbulence, the ups and downs that come with living with siblings and relatives with intellectual disability. There is a bit of harsh, outdated wording.
Yes.
But overall, the message and the way in which it's presented is very, very eye-opening.
Absolutely.
So, Laura, thank you again so much for making time and watching the movie. Are there any last minute thoughts that you'd like to share or anything?
So thank you for having me again. This was really fun. I always enjoy it. I was really happy at the end of the movie to see that they had some resources at the end. So they had phone numbers and websites and things so that you could learn more, you could volunteer, you could educate yourself more. So I liked how they just didn't end it there. They really encouraged you to seek other places and to continue the learning. So I thought that was great.
Make sure to leave a comment if you like what you hear. Go ahead and subscribe. I'm on Apple Podcasts, YouTube, SoundCloud, Spotify, at the Box Cutter Podcast. Send all feedback and suggestions to theboxcutterpodcast@gmail.com, because it takes a village to raise something beautiful.